All right, we are back. Again, this is a series called The End of Suffering. So, last week we had the opportunity to discuss the first rule or law to end suffering, which was forgiveness, forgiveness of others, but perhaps more importantly and harder is forgiveness of the self.
Mhm.
So, Fatima, welcome back, and please tell us what we have in store today.
Thank you for having me, Ivy. And I always enjoy our talk together. So today I was thinking about talking about the second law, what I call laws, but everybody will see it the way they want to see. But I myself, I look at it as the law of acceptance. And this is a very important part of human life. So the law of acceptance, or if you remember, Ivy, last time I told you, and I even have it on the first page on my website, is the triple A for life. Triple A for life, I called it accountability, acceptance, and appreciation. Accountability is nothing but basically responsibility.
Mhm.
So I wanted to emphasize today on the practice of acceptance. And this is why I'm bringing it right after the law of forgiveness, because the only way to forgive yourself and forgive the others is by accepting yourself
Right.
and accept yourself about whom you are. Whatever is happening now or happened before, when you start to unconditionally love yourself, then you're going to start to have full acceptance of yourself and you're going to forgive yourself. So, whatever had happened. You cannot change it. Dwelling about the past is not going to do anything. But what you need to do is think of the now and accept yourself about how you are now. Forgive any mistakes you did before in your life and take it from that.
I think that all sounds great, but of course, as with anything, these laws, rules, very simple, but easier said than done, which is why we're taking the time to talk about it. And
Uh-huh,
so my question is, and what I think a lot of people probably struggle with
uh-huh,
is this balance between acceptance,
uh-huh,
accountability,
uh-huh.
and also acceptance without judgment attached to it. Right? In order to take accountability, there has to be some judgment of the self if you want to take responsibility and evolve and recognize your part in whatever it is that you've done. But then again, if we judge too much, then we might fall into, as you mentioned, the spiraling, the dwelling. And so, what can you tell us just from personal experience or from a spiritual perspective that might help aid other people in doing so?
First thing we need to acknowledge, Ivy, is this planet is full of people with different levels of consciousness. So we just need to accept ourselves and the others the way they are. That's number one thing. And then you start to, like you said, how the action. Acceptance for me does not mean to be passive and not take actions, okay? The actions that springs from the wisdom of acceptance is powerful. And how is that? You would say someone is responsible is the person who has the ability to respond and act with love and compassion rather than anger and resentment. So if you try to view your life, just do a life review daily,
Mhm.
okay, instead of waiting for an experience to go or like through the experience you're angry or whatever happened. So view the experience daily. How did I respond? Did I respond with love, loving myself, loving the others the way they are? Or did I respond with anger and resentment? As a therapist, I do get a lots of clients. And the thing that I noticed, like we call in math, in fractions, the common denominator of their anger and resentment is always, but he made me, especially when it comes to partner, he
Yeah.
made me or she made me. And I always give them one sentence. I say, can you put an affirmation daily is learn to say, I make myself. So basically, first step is get yourself out of the blaming. Okay.
Mhm.
Don't blame anyone for what's happening. Try to breathe at the moment or try to ignore whatever is happening if there is a conflict with someone through a tough experience. And always remind yourself, what can I learn from this experience, or how can I make myself better from this experience, instead of responding with anger and resentment. It doesn't take you anywhere. And of course, that will need discipline, and the discipline would lead to maturity. So I always tell my clients the two important points you need to go home with is, how can I make myself? And to make myself, I'm going to need discipline and I'm going to need maturity. I mean, discipline will lead to maturity. Now, if you need some examples, I can give you some examples from my own life, or would that help a little bit or answer your question?
Absolutely. I just want to touch on a few things you said. So I think a lot of us fall into blaming, and I remember growing up, right, as a child, this
Uh-huh.
person did this and saying that to my parents. And one thing that my father told me, very similar to what you just said, is no one makes you do anything or makes you feel anything. You allow them to make you feel that way. And I think that that's very important because accountability, right, as you mentioned, it's not about being passive.
Mhm.
So we have to take responsibility for how we're feeling. And the other thing that I read or heard the other day, I'm not sure where, but it stuck with me, is that you yourself are not angry or sad. You are yourself experiencing anger and sadness. And so I don't know if you practice similar kind of disassociation techniques where on one hand you're acknowledging the emotion but not tying it to the self. And then I guess I just want to hear when you talked about doing daily life reviews. I don't know what that looks like. And so I'm curious what daily life reviews look like for you. So kind of
Yes,
a question and a comment for you.
yeah. I mean, I learned at young age, okay, from two, from the parents, of course, like you mentioned, your parents, and you also learn from teachers. So at young age, at the age of 7, I would do anything to just go to on Fridays to meet with the Sufi scholars and listen to them. So the discipline of life review, I learned it from the Sheikh Muhammad al-Ghazali when I was young, and he was like known with his excellent character. And he used to tell us, to succeed in life, you need to always have a life review. And because he said, when you die, that's the first thing that happens. You move to the transition center, and the transition center, you're going to have a life review. So he taught us, why would you wait until you die to have a life review? Every day when we go to sleep is basically we're practicing death. You're dissociating from the environment. So do your own life review. So I learned to do that at young age. Before I go to bed, I always do my own life review. And then as you review your life, you become more of the observer. It's not like when you are in the middle of the experience, you're not really conscious and aware of the experience. But when you are reviewing it every day from young age, that becomes a discipline. So you learn to become the observer of your experience. So you're not really, immersed in it. So if there is a conflict of whatever, you learn to dissociate and just watch. So that was one experience. The other one was my father. My father was handicapped and he didn't have a hand, and he was orphan. He was born, his father died before he even was born. But I never learned my father blaming anyone about his situation, and he was always taking full responsibility of his life. And I always like questions, how come he never said, I'm orphan, I'm handicapped, I can't do this. He was taking full responsibility of his life from an orphan who didn't have what to eat, okay? And he died, one of the top millionaires back home. So he made himself with this attitude of full responsibility of making himself. So when people used to complain they don't have or whatever, he was always repeating that sentence, make yourself. I didn't have a father to make me. I made myself. So you learn from either by experience, like I learned from my father and I learned from my teacher, And this is basically how helped me in my own life to go through, like I told you last time, it's not easy for a mother to be separated from her two little ones for almost 4 years. It could have been very easy to just blame someone and cry about it. But I took full responsibility of the situation and I was patiently trying to solve the issue until it got solved. And challenges will not stop.
Right.
So we're calling this program together End of Suffering, but it's like the minute you end a challenge, you start another one because this is how we grow and from one level of consciousness to another. But every time you grow, maybe the challenges are still the same, but you are a different one because you learned how to go through them. I don't know if that
Absolutely.
resonates with you.
No, I mean, it absolutely does. Challenges in life don't stop. I think that's the whole reason we're put on earth is to learn. And how do we learn without being faced with obstacles? I
Yeah.
think that we tend to face the same challenges over and over again. And I think that that's probably a sign of what we need to work on, and how
Mhm,
we get out of those cycles is how we approach it.
mhm,
Um, but the one thing I wanted to just touch on really briefly is, which I want to highlight, which I think is important, is a part of acceptance
mhm.
is very much accountability. So this is my situation now, taking what part you've had in it. And to do so, I think in the best case scenario, it gives you a lot of agency, because when you accept it and you take responsibility and you avoid falling into this victim mentality, you then feel that you have the ability to then face those challenges head on. Whereas if you're taking the point of view, which you mentioned a lot of people do, where it's a victim mentality, this person is doing this to me, well, then you may not think about it, but subconsciously, that's not giving you a lot of options if life is being done to you rather than you being an active participant in it. And so that's just something I really think is important to highlight as well. But in terms of the challenges that we face, I absolutely agree. It's the skill set, which I hope our talks are equipping people with, is how to face those challenges. And one thing I want to mention, just from being in your class from a spiritual perspective, is there's one verse in the Quran that I really love that I think would probably resonate with a lot of people, regardless of their religious or spiritual affiliation, is with hardship, there is ease, which
Yeah.
is beautiful when you're going through
Yes.
a hard time. But I think it's worth mentioning that the reverse of that is also true. So usually we face a challenge head on. It's very difficult. And then we evolve from it, right? Life is beautiful after. And then
Mhm.
we have this period of bliss where we're like, wow, this is great. But then, as you mentioned, the challenges don't stop. So
But
with
I hit
ease,
you.
there's
Yeah.
also hardship.
Yes.
So I think why I wanted to point that out is I think that a lot of people, and myself, I'm speaking from experience, when you experience that the first time, it can be discouraging because you feel that you've made all this progress and then you're slapped in the face with something else. But really, I think if we see it as this cycle, and
Mhm.
as you know, and I don't think I need to say it, but progress is not always linear.
No.
And so I felt that last 2 weeks not too great, but the same thing, it's accepting I'm not in a good place right now. That's okay. Um, Not sure who's responsible, but I'll take accountability. And I think it's just allowing yourself also to feel what you're feeling,
Yeah.
because even if you've allowed other people to make you feel that way, you're still feeling it.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we have to go with the current instead of against the current. And
Mhm.
just to know this is our life today, not our life every day. So we accept what we're faced, we accept where we're at, and we move on from there. And so
Great. You got it.
I guess so. I guess I got it.
Yeah. I mean, just to end is one thing I always tell people, life on earth is a school.
Right.
So you're not going to get the same exam that you had in math in high school. You'll get it in college. And
Unless you failed it the first time. But
then
yes.
well, even if you fail it, they're not going to repeat to you the same questions. They try
Right.
to bring to you different questions within the same course. And
Mm.
that's why if we fail with a task here, that's what life cycles are all about. You need to retake it with the different avatar. But anyway, my point is when you go to school, when you go to college or graduate school, the higher you get, the
Mhm.
challenging the test is. But
Right,
because you learned from all these years of schooling how to cope with them, and then instead of escaping, because what is acceptance? You don't escape the problem, you
right.
face it and you go through it and you solve it. So if you learn to accept it is what it is, I'm in school, I'm in this level, and whatever challenge I'm facing, I'm going through it. I'm not escaping it by any means. Lots of people, they escape life through distractions and movies, and if it's not drugs, alcohol, or partying or whatever, instead of, okay, there is this challenge,
Mhm.
okay, and I'm here to learn and grow. What can I do? And the two key points are discipline, so learn the tools to discipline yourself, and also maturity. And this maturity comes by realizing you're not a child who's in the store. I want this candy, I want this, and why this? You're all over the place. You have to get yourself centered and realize, like, hey, this is a school. I need to learn and have fun as I'm learning. And that's how it goes. So for me, acceptance is basically a key for the forgiveness and for the growth.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. So I think that's a really nice place to end.
Okay.
We will pick up next time for whatever you have in store for us, and I look forward to seeing what that is.
Okay. Thank you, Ivy, for having me. Bye-bye.